Hi, hello, and welcome, or welcome back, I suppose. We're on a little two-for-one deal today, and honestly, kind of inadvertently ended up on the theme of expectations set on women by themselves and others. Well, mostly set on women, it isn't exclusive, but on the whole, they are the ones who suffer the most with these expectations. I will say that the second book does deal with the topic of eating disorders, so I understand if you only want to hear the review for book one, and I will put a reminder in again before I talk about it to give you that chance to back out. It makes sense that that's something that not everybody can deal with hearing about. I'm not going to go too much into detail with that side of things, but I sort of have to. It is the whole book. But up first, we have a wonderful little illustrated short story collection called Sugar and Other Stories by Joy San. The first thing I want to say is that I love that San flexed her illustrative muscles with this one. It gives us a range of styles throughout, most of it done in relatively simplistic styles, but managing to create some incredibly vivid imagery without any kind of realism, but we'll get onto that later. First, I want to talk about what we're greeted with before we even get to the first story. Just a deeply horrifying way to start things off, and it's almost made even more haunting given that it stands right next to this, which stylistically looks like it could be right at home in Hilda, for goodness sake. For goodness sake. We actually don't see the style she uses in this first story again, which is a bit of a shame. I just love the almost childlike style. Like style for children when I say childlike there, but that is juxtaposed with stories that look at topics that are generally much darker than that in tone. Like I said, this looks like it could fit in Hilda, but the topics that are being dealt with throughout the book are generally rather, dark. This is a horror short story collection rather, and this story is a great way to open the collection, the first one being Sugar. And it is rather strange, but that's certainly no bad thing, and it's honestly kind of funny. It's like, what if you had an assistant's dog, but instead it was a little bug demon? It's great, and this whole collection often balances light humour with the darkness, though sometimes that levity is a bit more sort of, to borrow a cliche, like a giggle at a funeral kind of thing. It's a kind of, haha, oh. But I love that. I didn't really know what to expect when I went into this, but the vibes are absolutely immaculate. I don't think I've seen horror done like this before, and I think it's fantastic. Like, she can take such simple visuals and either make them feel deeply unsettling or just like you've seen visceral gore, despite it being in such a simple and undetailed style. Like, this here, there is nothing actually wrong with it, but it's bloody creepy, and maybe it's just a lack of nose for me. Like, that's certainly why Bratz dolls made me uncomfy as a kid, and like worse with the animated versions of them. Maybe it's like reminiscent of that. But then later in that same story we have this, which is just so nasty despite not being super detailed. Maybe it's nastier because it's so simplistic, but either way, I think it's fantastic. I'm so used to horror in this format being done with like the horror suddenly being a lot more stylistically realistic, but sticking with this kind of scrungly style was absolutely the right choice for me. I think my favourite in the collection either has to be Dental Plan, which is what those last two pictures were from, which is like a great allegory for the way that people contort themselves to fit aesthetic models and ideals, or my favourite is Too Much on Your Plate. I'm not sure. That one is about a woman basically working her arse off, both literally at her job and at home as well, but she deals with a husband who is just dead beat, and it drives her to the most viscerally violent thoughts, but she just brave faces it and puts up with a little melt. First off, San's style in this one is a break from everything else, and it is so gorgeous. Everything in this one is in the most rich watercolor, and I love how the inherent softness of that medium is used in opposition to some of the more sort of dark and violent scenes in this. This is a woman going through an internal breakdown, screaming from the inside, feeling like she can't escape, and it all works together so nicely. The colour palette of the violent scenes is also incredibly visceral. It all feels like we're literally on the inside. We're trapped in there with her and left feeling bereft at the end. We can't help her, and she can't or won't help herself. It is an incredible piece of fiction. I would be really interested to see what else Joy-san has to offer, especially in the horror realm, because this was so good. Like, not everyone in there was like a favourite, but the stuff that was good was top tier. So I would be interested to see what else she creates. Now, up next is Hungry Ghost by Victoria Ying, and just a reminder that this is a story about eating disorders, so if you do need to drop out, I get it. This book is incredibly heavy and difficult to read at times, which makes sense given the subject matter. It does not hold back or censor itself. This is about a teenage girl who is in the grips of this disorder, desperately trying to wrangle her way out. It starts, as things so often do, with her mother. We have Val, our main character, who is on Val about eating little and remaining thin from the time she is a young child, clearly in primary school, at a birthday party being given tiny little cake while everybody else is given a good healthy slice, because that doesn't matter. It's as long as her daughter remains thin, and this does not let up throughout. One of the hardest parts about reading this is that the mother clearly cannot see what's wrong with what she says or the way she speaks at any point, even when confronted with harsh truths. It's inevitably how she was raised, thin equals healthy, but the casual nature of her commentary is what makes it such a gut punch. It's nothing to her when it leaves her lips, but everything to her daughter upon entering her ears, because Val wants nothing more to be the best, if not the perfect daughter, so she does what she can to heed her mother's words, but that is going to kill her at some point. I'm sort of not following the narrative in a linear fashion here. I know it sounds a bit rambly, but there's a scene later on where Val finally tells her mother what's happening, and it broke me. Her mother is deeply dismissive of what she's being told, basically acting like she was not told that at all. She's just like, oh well, maybe try this exactly the same thing but in a different packaging. And like, yes, maybe she doesn't fully understand it, but she isn't trying to do that either. She isn't trying to understand what her daughter is telling her, and I really wish there was more development from the mother. As a reader, narratively, I understand that it makes sense. I am not critiquing it, because it works perfectly with what's been laid out at the beginning and why she remains stubborn about it, but because we've been with Val this whole time, we do want things to work out for her rather, on all sides. It's one of those things where it's like, as somebody who understands the narrative being told here, I get it. I get why the mother remains how she is throughout, but at the same time, there's that part of me that goes, but I wanted a happier ending, and I'll get to it later, but maybe the ending is happier for some, but not for me, I'm going to be honest, because a huge reason this story is so effective is the way it's told. Partly it is the use of it being a graphic novel, because it adds a visual element allowing for a different form of connection, but the narration style is so damn effective. Everything is basically an internal view from Val, and we get every unfiltered thought that comes through her brain And it is really something to see thoughts like this spelled out while making it clear that they do not make Val any less of a good person overall. Because when you use a graphic novel, you're no longer having to fill in the describing a place, describing the person she's looking at. You can see that in front of you. So all you get is the internals. I think a graphic novel was exactly the right choice for this narrative being told, because there is no filtration through a break seeing other things in the text. All of the text in the narration is related to that. Like, all of the internal stuff, it is related to that. Like, she is full of love and care for her friends, but there is so much judgment inside her, and it isn't hard to see where it comes from. Her mother calls her best friend Jordan fat at every opportunity she gets, so it's no wonder that that gets internalized, because of course it bloody does. Every thought that Val has about herself, her loved ones, all of it is laid bare before us, and it is rough seeing something like this laid out so overtly. I can't say I haven't had invasive thoughts like this myself at times, and seeing it said by someone else really puts it into stark clarity how nasty that really is. Like, there's a reason we wouldn't say this stuff aloud, because it's awful. It's stuff that, if we have a modicum of decency, we would never say about somebody else, and yet it's the stuff that festers away inside if we're not careful. I mean, at one point, Val does flip out and say one of her ugly thoughts aloud to her friend Jordan, about her friend Jordan, and it is painful for everyone, but most of all for Jordan, who had zero clue that all of this was bubbling away inside her friend. So suddenly she's getting called fat and ugly by someone she loves more than anything. That scene and the confrontation with her mother are the two most powerful scenes in the book, because they are where the starkest truths come to the fore. This may well be very raw to someone who hasn't done any serious work regarding self-image and their relationship with food. I am not the person to say whether that is a positive or a negative. It is just a neutral statement I feel I have to make, even if it may well be a little redundant given everything I've just said. It is, however, in my opinion, a fantastic exploration of eating disorders and how that thinking can be generational. She is, I mean, her mother, she's not trying to intentionally pass on this ill health and awful thinking to her daughter, but the result is a girl who is mentally ill with an eating disorder, no matter her mother's intentions. Now, I am in two minds about how this rounds out, with the way that Val comes to terms with the kind of treatment she's had from her mother. On the one hand, no, she wasn't being intentionally malicious, so I understand that the reconciliation with the idea that this is just how she loves, I understand how that comes into place. This is a woman doing her best with the foundation that she was given. So when she wants her daughter to be healthy in the way that she thinks that works, I get it. And there's a strange relationship with food from both of them, so it is hard to then go, well, she's passing on her in a way that is not intentionally negative thing, but this is no. But on the other hand, she was confronted with how she has made her daughter develop an eating disorder, which, let's be frank, could very well kill her, and she just sort of continues on as if that hasn't happened. This is a woman who, in this book, loses her husband, is later confronted with the fact that it is not an impossibility, that she could well lose her daughter, and there is just zero self-reflection, and it doesn't seem like there's any real hope for that. It's tough, and I do think that lack of self-reflection, not even change, I'm not expecting change, but I am expecting or hoping for a little bit of reflection on the way things have been. I think that's what made me go, this is an absolutely incredible book, but I don't think it can break into my favourites. That is what keeps lingering on with me when I think on it as a whole. But I think that's, it's definitely something that will sit with people differently depending on their own experiences. So it's one of those where I go, I did like this book. I thought it was fantastic. I don't think it can break into my favourites just because of the way it sits with me. But I think the way that ends, that if somebody else has had that similar experience of the way things started with Val, maybe that reconciliation makes sense for them, or they're in a different part of their journey to me and that makes sense for them and it's a little bit healing for them perhaps. But for me, I wasn't a huge fan. I don't know what's next week, to be honest. I'm starting to read my first Bad Rep Book Club read soon, but they usually do take a while. So I would maybe say expect some graphic novels in the upcoming future if I don't manage to finish that with any speed, because I do really want to try to keep up with my weekly uploads. I've got a sort of good thing going on here at the minute. Let me know what books you've been reading recently that tackle heavy topics really bloody well, because both of these do that in very different ways. Also, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, feel free to ring that notification bell and all that other cringe shit I'm supposed to ask you to do in my videos. But most importantly, I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful whenever you are watching this. Take good care of yourself. Right.